Ahora sí. Well, good morning. Thank you for being here so early. I do apologize. My voice, I've lost it, but I think it's because of the last penalty last night, the match, the last penalty shot by Jesus Navas. That is when I lost my voice. So we're running out of time already. I have a question. I'm going to put a question to the two speakers, and then I'll try to have a discussion with them, and after them we will have questions. If you don't have any questions, well, then I'll have questions for them. But we do need to conclude at 10. So let us try and be as agile as possible. The title, and that is obvious why it had to start this way. It's a dialogue between the new economy, traditional economy, internet, a value, a challenge. My question, it's a challenge, of course. Is it a value? Is it not a little of a bubble? Is there not a bit of a bubble here? Good morning. Thank you. Thank you so much to Google, to Barbara, for giving us this opportunity to be here with Paco and with Angel and with a highly qualified audience. And I'd also like to say that this is an important discussion. So, a value, a challenge. I think both of these comments are true. Well, a value because it is a value. I think it is proven to be very valuable. And I think we should leave our prejudices aside. And if we look at this by using empirical thinking, this convergence, this combination an increase in advanced computing on the one hand with the internet connectivity is changing the economies, and this is being done and moving in two or three directions. Well, higher growth rates, for instance. There are more and more data at our disposal which clearly show that this combination is responsible for 15 or even 20% of the GDP of large and advanced economies. But what is even more relevant is the influence that this is having in doing things in a better way. What people call an increase in productivity, the productivity of work, but also total productivity of all factors. And it is also true that what I'm referring to, and Barbara already mentioned that in her presentation, this has led to a democratization in growth opportunities. Many actors, many economies are now active, and if it weren't for the internet, they would have to access the former growth elements of the economy. And then, of course, the network is making it possible for information and knowledge to be spread. So not only from the point of view of businesses, but if you move to logistics and finance and other aspects, all of this is changing. But the innovation processes, the knowledge can now be passed on at a high speed. And we're now finding that even the costs are competitive. And I tell my students after the class is finished, I said, look, what I've just taught you here in the Autonomous University, tomorrow afternoon it will be said by a professor in Harvard, Roland Grass, and MIT will be speaking about this day after tomorrow. So do contrast all this information. And the fact that you can do the same thing in Kenya, for instance, and the same as the fact that we're overcoming a lot of these barriers, cultural barriers, not only the physical barriers, but also cultural barriers. So all of this really is a challenge, and a challenge that is closely related to the Industrial Revolution. This is the third Industrial Revolution, and we'll be looking at this, Angel, in a minute, but we're talking about security and actually the increase in inequality, which I think is a very concerning factor. If literacy, education of people and of the countries is not coupled to the dynamism behind all these technologies, we do run the risk of really widening the gap in inequality. That is the very major, that is, I think, the biggest problem. Rather than the bubble you were mentioning. Okay, that was good. 4 minutes, 43 seconds. Perfect. So let's move on. And, well, you want it all, don't you? You want lots of information in a very, very short time span. Well, I don't want to repeat what has already been said, but let me just thank Google for this initiative. Thank you so much for this invitation and for this opportunity to be here and to speak. I'm a tiny bit worried, really, because about the title of this conference, the traditional economy vis-a-vis the new economy. I know Emilio is very modern, but I'm not a traditional, so who's going to be representing what? Am I the one who speaks on behalf of the traditional economy and you on behalf of the new economy? Well, Barbara has already given us a lot of information on the world we live in. She said there are over 2 billion internet users. Well, you know, this billion is a word that sort of slips off our tongue so easily, but this is really growing. And by 2016 or 2017, just about half of the world population will be connected to the internet. But not just half of the world population, but even in the emerging economies that started at zero. And Emilio talked about this, about 45% of the population will be connected, will be linked to the internet. And this is amazing. And this is something that is also referred to in a book by the economist Michael Ouspensky. These technologies are really contributing to the possibility of there being a convergence between countries. And this did not happen in the past, because in the past it was really the economies went in opposite directions rather than starting to converge. So now we need to understand that 50% of the population connects to the internet, but we're also linking machines to people and machines to machines. So when this 50% of the world population is linked to the internet, we will have some 20 billion connections, apart from the connections between people. So machine to machine, the internet of all things, and the LM2, or the sixth sense, miniaturization, connectivity of all these electronic elements. Basically, this means that you can put this on all kinds of different devices, and you can see what's happening, and all this to the benefit of environmental sustainability and well-being applications in the medical sector in the UK. Telemedicine is one of the first things, and this has led to a 45% drop in mortality. And then Barbara talked about the mobile open online courses. There is an initiative here in Spain of mugs through CICEP. This is a virtual university foundation, which was offered through MUX and others. And it has already reached over 500,000 students in very few months. So basically, this is a hyper-connected world with very intelligent devices, with processing speed which is ever faster, with mobility, with and this is obviously having an influence on the way in which we do business, the way in we create businesses or see other businesses disappear. But allow me to quote Thomas Friedman. I think he said this about a year ago or a year and a half ago. It has never been so difficult to find a job, which is true at the moment. It has never been so easy for those who are well prepared, who are familiar with the technologies, to invent a job or to find a customer. Anyone who has a bright idea can create a company overnight and can have access to talent, to muscle, and to find customers all over the world. So anyone and integrate all of these aspects will have a competitive edge. Thank you, Paco. Thank you. Okay, well, I think the two speakers have really discussed what we have put the stakes on the table. Well, to what extent is what I'm going to say true? Does Spain have a competitive edge because of its geographic location, because of its influence over a certain part of the world, or because of the language, or any other circumstances? Are we perhaps at a disadvantage? I think that the things that you've just mentioned are an advantage. But let me also say that in the digital world, the advantages, the linguistic advantages, are only very relative, or the fact that we are well located. All this is pretty relative because of the technology we're talking about. But it's true that Spain does have a competitive edge. It has a creative capacity if the conditions are right. It's not true that there is no energy, no innovative spirit amongst individuals, amongst Spanish businessmen. But the environment is so important, and that is where we're really lagging behind. Our country, I'm not saying Europe, no, I think Europe is really, well, in an equal manner, is showing that it is facing up to these challenges. But in Spain, we've spent too much time. We've been entertained over those 11 years of economic growth, which will conclude, or which ended up concluding in 2007. We had high employment rates, and we generated a 14% GDP at the time. But then, thanks to private initiative and public support, Spain was starting to play a role, and in the ITC services sector. And I think we are a bit behind other countries. If you look at the United States or if you look at India, the public sector needs to play a role, a leadership role, just like the hare in the race, even though the hare may then withdraw. The United States is a leader in the production of goods and services, and these goods and services related to ITC, precisely because the Clinton administration took the initiative and then withdrew. So if we are at the forefront here, if the United States is at the forefront in the development of information technology, well, that is because they created a lot of clusters, just like in Bangalore. But anyway, The fact that this technological discontinuity is there, well, you can overcome it very, very rapidly. And it's cheap because you don't really understand why in certain countries the authorities are sort of cutting the pace of convergence, whereas that I think should really be the main objective. You talked about a country which I think is a very interesting country, something that we need to discuss. When you talk about Bangalore in the south of India, two hours from Bangalore by car, you've got Anandapur, which is where the Vicente Ferrer Foundation is, which is the biggest inferno on earth. And that is only 2 hours away from the biggest producer of computer experts, and this is 2 hours away from the biggest trash hold in the world. So what about Spain? Are we in an advantage or disadvantage? What do you think? Well, the sector is so dynamic that you could really be winning one day, and 3 years later you could be lagging behind. It all depends whether you're moving rapidly enough. Well, yes, from it just goes. It's very quick to lose your edge. Spain is a country which uses technologies very rapidly. It takes them over very rapidly. After the United States, it's the country which has the highest penetration of intelligent mobile phones. If we look at European ratio, Spain is at the very, very top, very much so, in terms of the very sophisticated use of internet amongst those users of the internet below the age of 35. So when we set up programs for the information society to stimulate the use of the information society and the internet, and this was in the period of 2004, 2006, Spanish society really responded very rapidly. We have the digital ID card. We have a part of our health system which is interconnected, and that is unique. Are you sure? Are you sure? Yes. Well, but it's not fully exploited, basically, but it does exist. In 2010, the United Nations, there's a ranking of electronic administration in the United Nations, and we were the third country in the world and the first in Europe on electronic administration. Australia, Korea, and Spain. That was a third place. And this, in terms of administrative processes and which are accessible to citizens through these procedures, whether you use them more or less, well, this comes back to what Emilio said. You need public support there, because you don't really understand how these countries have actually managed to get there at the forefront if they didn't get this public support. So let me move on and talk a little about the advantages and disadvantages. I mean, this is going so fast that you need to be there. You need to be right there. In the case of India, where a very large number of multinationals have been doing their outsourcing. They've been getting certain ICT activities to be done in India, but now the companies are moving away. There's going to be this insourcing. They say, look, I want this closer to home. I want to have this closer culturally speaking, geographically speaking, and I also want this to be closer to me in terms of time scale. And then, of course, the question in which you build, you work, well, over there is perhaps not what we should be accepting. But anyway, that's a different debate altogether. Okay, it's 10 to 10. 10 to 10, so we're really running out of time. Any questions? Could we have a microphone for the speakers? Can you speak in a sort of telegraphic style? And if you tell us who you are. Miguel Perez, Association of Internet Users. A comment I have is that there's a high level of concentration. The network makes it possible to generate jobs very quickly, but once these jobs are global, it leads to a monopoly, a quasi-monopoly. So what can we do in this area? How can we make sure that this is not the case and that we can really have global diversity? Is this for Emilio? Miguel, what do you mean? Monopoly in the services? Yes, monopoly in the availability of services. Think of social networks or search engines. I mean, they work so well, and that's great. That's great. But they do make it really difficult. You get entrapped in these networks and you get difficulties, entry barriers, and you can't create any competition. When you're talking about innovation, well, common sense tells you that in a first phase, you should let the creators, the innovators, to take advantage of this economy of scales. And then at a given moment in time, well, then you need to start regulating in order to lower the entry barriers. I think this has happened in all types of innovation processes. I don't really think that the situation is particularly worrying. I mean, I think you, I'm sure you know a lot more about this, but there's a possibility of broadening these straitjackets, of widening these straitjackets which the actors have in social networks, but even the innovation dynamics as such. We've had such a high degree of protagonism of the different actors in this type of development. This could lead to a certain degree of concentration, but even, well, what we saw in the software industry some years ago, the fact that they sort of got bigger and bigger, and then in a second phase they started to buy up and merge or buy up all the possible competitors. Well, I think that is no longer true. Now we have a certain plurality or subsectors which are a little bit more mature. I think that this is also going to happen in other areas. I really don't think that is the main problem. I'm much more worried about the inequalities that this is generating, the different degree of literacy in these different technologies. Did you have any other questions? Yes, right at the back of the room. Please be brief. And Marlo Morina, Technofor. Well, we're not India, we're not US, we're not Korea, we don't have our that legal system. We're not Hindus, fortunately, I guess. But so what do we have in Spain? What have we got in Spain? What makes us different, and what could we do to exploit that? Well, we do have certain things. I was having lunch the other day with a European diplomat, and he told me that this was something that was sort of very much accepted amongst the diplomats in Europe. Spain is one of the countries in the world which accepts challenges and reacts to challenges, and particularly technological challenges. So, you know, we have a society which is very receptive to change and to use technology and to use them and incorporate them in our daily lives. So we have a strong base of professionals who have been extremely well trained. If you look at the important businesses related to information technologies, you've got Spanish experts working in these companies, also in research and development. There's a lot of creativity in the Latin environment. perhaps I'd like to say particularly here in Spain, because in Spain, well, over the traditional Latino, we have another element which perhaps comes from our education. We're very shy. We're shy, and well, we don't really want to feel that we're being ridiculous. So we try to really make sure that if we do this, we want to do it right. Well, these MUCs, this MUCS I was mentioning before, is having some incredible success. 500,000 people listening to these courses on the net because there's an enormous demand for this in Spanish. That, again, is an element which we need to take into account. I wondered what would the French do if they had Spanish? You know, the French and the French diplomats, if they spoke Spanish, or perhaps they would have been different. No he entendido la referencia a los franceses para nada. Well, can I just say something briefly on what vectors you see the new economy is going to base its growth on? Spain has a lot of good technologies, telecommunications. We're very well prepared. But then again, we need to create a lot of jobs. So what economic vectors are we going to be able to develop this new economy? And do you think this growth, is there potential growth for employment? For who? For Emilio? For Mr. Well, I think here we need to draw a distinction between the intensive technology sectors, that is, and those sectors that can use technologies to grow more. These are, and to grow better. And here, at this, we want to make sure. Well, we don't know whether this growth is really going to lead to more jobs. If you look at the financial sector, well, everyone knows that this is the largest consumer in goods and services in the information technology sector. But the financial institutions in Spain were pioneers in adopting these technologies, but they didn't always translate this into jobs. Because you must understand that there's one basic assumption. If basically, if you have an increase in productivity, in the increase in efficiency in the short term, it doesn't precisely create jobs, create employment. So to turn your question round, I think we need to say that there are sectors, traditional sectors in our economy, which I think can still go a long way in using these technologies and perhaps generate jobs. These are sectors that over the last 4 or 5 years, because of this terrible crisis, they have become very dynamic and they have been great exporters. I'm talking about the agro-food industry, and I'm talking about services to businesses, and then another important sector, the tourist sector. So what I do think I can say, and what I do think I can forecast, if we, start using these technologies, those sectors which are very intensive in employment, we will see increases in productivity. But at this stage, I cannot identify any sector where employment, the creation of jobs, will be generated because of IT technologies and information technologies. Because basically, and I think we need to be aware of this, I think we need to be realistic. It is basically something that will reduce the number of jobs. So can I make a comment, just a very short comment, as to where we can do more? Javier Santizo, a friend, carried out a series of analyses recently and said that, or observed, that out of the 10 or 12 startups of information technology, the most successful ones. 3 of these are in Spain. One set up by Spaniards and another set up by foreigners in Spain. And this, I think, is where we have an enormous potential. And I think we're really not dedicating enough attention and time to this, because we are attractive. We are attractive to attract intelligence, talent from people, researchers, businessmen, foreigners, because in this country they see that there is a basis, there is a well-educated population, we have the right infrastructures, and we're putting so many obstacles in their ways through visas. We're making it so difficult for these people to actually come into our country. You know, it'd be so simple to solve this. And if you could really have this foreign talent come here, and then together with the people who are here, we could create an enormous dynamism to generate the economic aspects. And this, you know, there's many indirect jobs related to the generation of technologies, and economists feel that you could multiply this figure by 10. Hopefully. Okay, we're really running out of time, so just the very last question. Oh, or I can do this perhaps. Well, we missed the train, I suppose. Well, I suppose some of us may say that we haven't missed this train, or are we really in the very, very last carriage of this train? Well, Angel, no, we haven't missed this train at all. Not at all. I mean, if the energy and the initiatives which exist in our country are a clear example of this, we're certainly not the dumbest kid in the class, not at all. I think what we need to do to work in the information and society, what we want is the private sector. The private sector, of course, has a limited margin, but we must all understand that if you invest in leadership, you need to preach. You don't want to just preach to the converted. I mean, what you need to do is you can't just teach someone a lesson and don't give the right example. Well, Paco already said this too. I'm not a pessimist, not at all. Compared to other countries in Europe, this country, the Spaniards of today are better than the Spaniards of my generation, and we have this, assimilation capacity. We're really capable of assimilate the situation. That the fact that we are entrepreneurs, and if you don't have financial asphyxia, you create businesses, and it would be really good if we could get people to be a little more supportive. We could be at the head, not just in the generation of GDP in the sector. No, not only that, I think we could certainly hold a very good position in generating innovation and businesses. Well, of course, you were funny when you said that about the fauna, about the species having been improved. And are we going to be leaving a better society to our kids, to our children? Anyway, that's really for a future debate, and I have my doubts as to whether we will be leaving a better society to our children. Well, to tell you the truth, we wouldn't be here, I don't think, if it weren't for the fact that we haven't missed the train. We've missed some trains, I guess. But which trains have we missed? The industrial one. And who's to blame? Who's to blame? Well, again, this would take a long time. I think it's simply a question of priorities. And Emilio already talked about this, a question of focusing on the real estate sector. The real estate sector, which had a very high return. Other countries are progressing, and there, of course, we haven't really been able to progress. We've recovered some of that lost ground, But there's a lot of dynamism here, and everything that we've achieved will be lost if we stop. So our references are certain technological positions and the social uses of these technologies. For instance, one example of this, a value which we have and which I think is very important and which we're not really using or fully using when we introduce applications on the network. We're talking about the signal, the strength of the signals in Spain, despite the fact that we are people who use the internet to a very large extent. I spoke to some colleagues yesterday, and in the United States, they said that they will have a 95% coverage for the internet, 95%. But that covers 95% of the population, not of the territory. In Spain, we have a 95 or 96% coverage of the entire territory. Now that gives you so many opportunities for health, for the health sector, for education. So we do have a lot of opportunities. The only question is, well, we just need to end up believing this and take the right steps to move further in that direction. Right, 10:05. Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, Paco. And thank you so much, Marisa, for having asked me to come, because I've learned so much. Thank you.